And together they formed the vintage pair. Got de Havilland VH-82A Tiger Moth on the flight line, and this was the aircraft that was designed as a Tiger Moth successor for both the RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force. It was to be produced, as well as in Canada, by de Havilland in the UK at its plants at Hatfield in Hertfordshire and Harden near Chester. And while it first took to the air from Downs View in Toronto, the de Havilland Canada factory airfield, in May 1946, the drawings for an aircraft of this type had first been penned as early as 1943 by one Zidrod Yakimiuk, the de Havilland Canada chief engineer who'd worked for the PZL company in Poland before the war, before he left for France when his country was about to be overrun, and from there he rapidly went on to de Havilland Canada. Now, Francis St Barbe, who was a director of de Havilland in the UK, is reputed to have said to Yakimiuk, "If you can make a good trainer, I will sell it," and the rest is history. It was developed as cost effectively as possible, but it was a high priority programme for the British parent company because it offered so many advances over the Tiger Moth, and those advances would be necessary for the new generations of aircraft that trainees, being trained initially on this aeroplane, would hopefully progress onto. For example, in contrast to the likes of the Tiger Moth, it has wing flaps, it has brakes, it has an enclosed cockpit, and it has a proper radio. Early orders for this aircraft, immediately after World War II, were pretty slow. There were several reasons for that. There were lots of surplus wartime trainers still available, which were perfectly serviceable for the needs of many air arms, and a lot of governments, including the British one, didn't have a great deal of money at their disposal after years of hostilities to buy new aircraft. Added to that, the Chipmunk had an undeserved bad reputation in its early years for being unsafe while spinning. Pretty soon things picked up. 735 Chipmunks were taken on by the RAF, 217 were built in Canada, and 66 more by OGMA, the Portuguese state aircraft factory, adding up to a total production run of about 1,280. And there are still plenty of those 1,280 Chipmunks flying today, because it's still an absolutely splendid tailwheel equipped trainer. Two aircraft heading straight in towards us for a break. One Chipmunk holiday is quite simply one of the most fantastic aviation experiences you can have. And that much has been discovered by countless trainee aviators down the years. This aircraft first came into RAF service with the Oxford University Air Squadron in February 1950. And they went on to be used by many different types of RAF training establishment, along with by the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy and the Army Air Corps for basic training. Two aircraft in now for a crossover. They also had some other interesting military uses, including with the RAF Gatto station flight in West Berlin, which is probably one of the most famous Chipmunk operators. They were used on photographic reconnaissance, and occasionally it's now become known electronic intelligence gathering missions, able as they were to roam freely around the Berlin control zone. Stationed in the vicinity, intelligence that went to the highest levels of the Western Allied governments. And indeed, one of the last chipmunks to be used at Gatow is now one of those on the strength of the RAF Battle of Britain Memorial flight for tail dragger training and refresher purposes. Both privately owned, both ex-RAF aeroplanes. The one in the lead was built in 1950. The red and white one following it the following year. And in these two schemes they depict very well the changing liveries worn by RAF Chipmunk trainers down the years. Team leader in the predominantly silver aeroplane with the yellow bands is owned by airline pilot David Petters, who first started out on the display scene in 2018, and he's also one of the Lancaster taxi pilots here at East Kirkby. The red and white aeroplane is owned by the Higgins family, and John Higgins is flying it. At one stage he was the youngest holder of a display authorisation in the UK when he was aged just 20, and he's built up many hundreds of hours on chipmunks in the years since, and here he is now once again holding a very tight formation. Very nicely flown break there. The Chipmunk's always been a super display aeroplane. Quite a few display teams have been equipped with Chipmunks. The RAF had a couple called the Blue Chips and the Skylarks, and the last of them in military service was an Army Air Corps display team called the Grey Owls, operated from the Army Air Corps Centre at Middle Wallop, the name reflecting the somewhat veteran nature of the instructors who flew the aeroplanes. The red and white one is based at a farm strip near Newark. The silver and yellow one is housed at Fenland Aerodrome, where David Petters uses this and another Chipmunk for training use to this day and on experience flights, so do a search for that. And if you'd like to fly in a Chipmunk, they'd be delighted to hear from you, or indeed if you wanted to undertake training on this classic aeroplane, one of the UK's great pilot makers.
How London? About half the
The team were always really pleased to see it East Kirkby, because they actually made their debut here as a duo, the vintage pair. It was de Havilland Day that was staged here at the centre in 2019. A bit of a late addition to the programme this year, replacing the Calidus Autogyro, which unfortunately had to withdraw. Lovely to see them, and they're staying in close formation now as they get ready to land.
It just couldn't make it away.
Well, wasn't that just a delectable piece of flying? A formation side-slipped approach from David Petters and John Higgins in their Chipmunks together, the marvellous vintage pair